Have you ever believed someone's story so completely that it felt like a part of your own reality, only to discover later that almost everything you thought you knew was a lie? That feeling of shock, disbelief, and betrayal. It's raw, it cuts deep. And right now, millions of people around the world are grappling with that exact sensation. The reason? Meghan Markle. More specifically, Meghan Markle's education, or, as her sister Samantha claims, the lack thereof. The narrative that has been carefully cultivated, polished, and broadcast to millions of adoring fans. The glamorous, accomplished, college-educated Meghan may not be what it seems. Samantha Markle, who has repeatedly been outspoken about her sister's public persona, has made a bold, explosive claim. Meghan never earned a university degree and, according to her, she is in fact a mere primary school graduate. Think about that for a second. The woman who married into one of the most scrutinized royal families in the world, who speaks about empowerment, women's education, and her supposed global achievements. What if the foundation of it all is built on exaggeration, misrepresentation, or even outright fabrication? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine the impact of such a revelation. Public trust, fan loyalty, the narratives we consume about celebrities, all of it is suddenly thrown into question. It's the ultimate dramatic twist, the kind that makes people pause mid-scroll on social media, the kind that fuels hours of debate online and endless headlines in tabloids. But why does this story matter right now? Because the timing is not coincidental. Samantha Markle has chosen this moment to speak out. Perhaps it's driven by frustration, resentment, or a sense of moral duty. Or maybe it's a calculated move to reclaim her own voice in a saga that has long overshadowed her. Whatever the motive, the claims themselves are incendiary. Let's start at the beginning. Meghan Markle's rise to fame did not happen overnight. She was born into a middle-class family in Los Angeles, the daughter of Doria Ragland and Thomas Markle Sr. But even from the earliest stages, there were stories about her being ambitious, driven, and unapologetically determined to make it in Hollywood. Her career, of course, included a mixture of minor roles, guest appearances, and eventually, a defining part on the television series Suits. On paper, Meghan appeared to be an intelligent, educated, and accomplished woman. She was presented as someone who had attended Northwestern University, studied theater and international relations, and had laid the groundwork for a global career. It was an image meticulously crafted. An image that made her a compelling match for Prince Harry, a modern, sophisticated, and worldly figure who could navigate the complexities of royal life. But according to Samantha Markle, that image may be far from the truth. She alleges that Meghan's university degree was fabricated, a detail that, if true, casts doubt not just on Meghan's personal narrative, but on every public claim she has made about her achievements. And here's where it gets particularly complicated. This isn't just about embellishing a resume to land a job. This is about public perception, celebrity influence, and the way that narratives can be weaponized to gain power, status, and legitimacy. Think about it. If a single detail about someone's life is false, how do you assess the rest of their story? Can you trust what they say about themselves, about others, about causes they champion? And this is where Samantha's allegations hit hardest. The controversy over Meghan's education has simmered for years, but now, the stakes are higher. Public curiosity about the royal family is insatiable. Every statement, appearance, or revelation is magnified, dissected, and debated across social media platforms, news outlets, and gossip columns. And when someone claims that a fundamental aspect of Meghan's biography, her education, is not true, it invites a cascade of questions, speculation, and, inevitably, judgment. Did Meghan intentionally mislead the public? Or is this a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by family drama? Is Samantha motivated by truth, resentment, or a desire for attention? And most importantly, how does this revelation, if true, impact Meghan's reputation, her credibility, and her legacy? Let's pause for a moment and consider Samantha Markle herself. She is not just a disgruntled sister looking for the spotlight. She is a person who has watched her sister's rise from relative obscurity to global recognition and has publicly voiced concerns about the discrepancies she perceives in Meghan's story. Samantha's claims are bold, and they are specific. She asserts that Meghan did not attend the university she has claimed in the past, and that there are no verifiable records of her completing a degree. Furthermore, she frames this as not merely a personal grievance, but a matter of public record, a truth that should matter to anyone invested in transparency and authenticity. Now, it's easy to dismiss family disputes, especially among celebrities, but the scale here is significant. Meghan's life is under a microscope like few others in history. Every detail is public, every claim is scrutinized, and every contradiction has the potential to dominate headlines for days, weeks, or even months. This isn't simply about an embellished resume. It's about credibility, authenticity, and the fragile balance between public image and private truth. And when Samantha Markle makes a claim as serious as alleging that her sister never attended university, it cannot simply be brushed aside. The tension in this story lies in the contrasts. On one hand, Meghan is celebrated as a figure of empowerment, someone who overcame obstacles to achieve prominence on a global stage. On the other hand, if Samantha's allegations are true, there is a stark contradiction. A woman lauded for her intelligence, sophistication, and educational achievements may have misrepresented a core part of her biography. This contrast is what drives curiosity, fuels debate, and makes the story irresistible. It's the kind of revelation that makes people question not only Meghan's character, but the very narratives we consume about public figures. And yet, even as we delve into this story, there is a delicate balance to strike. We are not here to pass judgment immediately. We are here to examine the claims, evaluate the evidence, and understand the broader context. The drama is undeniable, but the stakes are higher than mere scandal. This is about truth, perception, and the ways in which families, media, and public figures interact in a world where every detail can be broadcast to millions of people within seconds. By now, you might be asking yourself, if Samantha is correct, what does this mean for Meghan's public persona? What does it mean for the causes she champions, the speeches she delivers, and the image she has carefully curated for years? And, perhaps most importantly, what does it mean for us, the audience, who have invested time, admiration, and belief in a narrative that may not be entirely accurate? These are the questions that make this story so compelling and so volatile. But here's the kicker. While Samantha's claims are explosive, they are only the beginning. There are hints, leads, and pieces of evidence that have yet to be fully explored, each one more revealing than the last. The discrepancies between Meghan's claimed educational background and the records her family says exist are just the tip of the iceberg. There are former classmates, teachers, and public records that can either substantiate or refute these claims. And as we begin to dig deeper, the story becomes increasingly complex, full of contradictions, surprising facts, and emotional beats that will challenge what you think you know. This is not a story that resolves neatly. It is messy, it is dramatic, and it is full of tension. Every chapter, every revelation, every piece of evidence contributes to a larger narrative about truth, perception, and the power of storytelling. And make no mistake, the stakes are incredibly high. For Meghan, these claims could tarnish her carefully constructed image and affect her legacy. For Samantha, speaking out carries the risk of backlash, ridicule, and further estrangement from her sister. And for the audience, this story forces us to confront the uncomfortable question of how much we trust what we see, hear, and read about public figures. So, as we begin this exploration, I want you to hold on to one thought. Nothing in this story is exactly what it seems. Every detail, every claim, every revelation must be examined critically. And as Samantha Markle continues to speak out, providing evidence and testimony about her sister's alleged misrepresentations, the tension only escalates. The deeper we go, the more shocking the contradictions become, the more emotional the stakes feel, and the more impossible it is to turn away. By the end of this story, you will have seen the evidence, the claims, and the contradictions laid bare. You will have heard from family members, former classmates, and public records that paint a picture starkly different from the one presented in the media. And you will be forced to ask yourself, if Meghan Markle did indeed fabricate her educational achievements, what does that mean for the story we have all been told? And if she didn't, what motivates these allegations, and how do they fit into the broader tapestry of celebrity, family conflict, and public perception? When you hear Meghan Markle's name, what comes to mind first? A poised, glamorous figure at royal events? A self-assured Hollywood actress with a heart for charity? A modern woman breaking barriers in a centuries-old institution? That's the persona the world has been sold. Carefully curated, polished, and almost too perfect to be real. But the deeper you dig, the more cracks you start to see. And sometimes, those cracks aren't just tiny flaws in the facade. Sometimes, they're wide chasms that reveal a completely different story from the one everyone believes. The public persona of Meghan Markle is a product of years of deliberate crafting, media amplification, and public consumption. Every magazine cover, every red carpet appearance, every interview has reinforced a narrative of intelligence, sophistication, and accomplishment. She's presented as someone who excelled academically, who earned a degree from Northwestern University, who was ready to take on the world and, eventually, the royal family. But what if that carefully curated narrative doesn't match reality? That's where Samantha Markle enters the picture. Her claims are explosive. According to her, Meghan's entire educational narrative is fabricated, a story built for public consumption rather than grounded in fact. Before we dive into Samantha's revelations, it's important to understand the stakes of Meghan's public persona. In a world where fame, influence, and credibility are currencies, the perception of being educated, accomplished, and worldly matters enormously. It's not just about personal pride or family validation. It's about public trust, influence, and legitimacy. For someone in Meghan's position, every detail about her past, her schooling, her work, her achievements, is scrutinized. And every embellishment, intentional or not, has the potential to ripple across media narratives and public perception. From a young age, Meghan seemed to understand the power of image. Born in Los Angeles to Doria Ragland and Thomas Markle Sr., she was raised in a family that valued independence and ambition. Yet, even in childhood, there were whispers of a personality that sought attention, admiration, and a platform. Some accounts describe a confident, self-assured girl who knew her own mind. Others hint at a young woman learning early on how to shape stories about herself. Whether these traits are admirable or problematic depends on perspective, but one thing is clear: Meghan was always aware of the lens through which the world watched her. Hollywood amplified this awareness. When Meghan appeared on television, from minor roles to her breakout on Suits, she didn't just play a character. She projected a version of herself that fit the narrative she wanted to sell. Interviews highlighted her intelligence, her international awareness, and her charitable initiatives. Public appearances emphasized her sophistication and poise. Each moment contributed to the persona of a woman who was educated, accomplished, and prepared for global attention. But appearances, as we know, can be deceptive. Contrast this with Samantha Markle's perspective. Samantha has consistently portrayed Meghan as someone who exaggerates, manipulates, and sometimes outright fabricates elements of her history. Her claim that Meghan never earned a university degree, if true, would dramatically alter our understanding of that public persona. Imagine the cognitive dissonance. A woman celebrated for her intelligence and global awareness, a supposed graduate of a prestigious university, who, according to her own sister, never completed anything beyond primary school. It's the kind of contradiction that makes audiences stop mid-scroll, question what they know, and demand answers. What's particularly striking about Meghan's public persona is how it has been accepted without question for so long. Media outlets, talk shows, and celebrity commentators have often repeated her biography verbatim, citing Northwestern University and her degree in theater and international relations as if it were unquestionable fact. Fans celebrated her as a modern, educated woman ready to bring fresh perspective to royal life. Public figures referenced her achievements as inspiration. And yet, beneath the surface, questions lingered, raised mostly by family members and a few investigative journalists. Consider the contradictions between Meghan's carefully curated image and the accounts Samantha and others have provided. Publicly, Meghan is described as well-educated, articulate, and socially conscious. Privately, according to Samantha, her academic credentials are unverifiable, with no records to substantiate her university attendance. Former classmates, teachers, and family members reportedly have conflicting stories about her academic achievements. Even the timeline of her schooling has discrepancies that raise eyebrows. If Samantha's claims are accurate, the narrative of a young woman pursuing higher education is not only misleading but entirely fabricated. The drama intensifies when you realize the stakes extend beyond mere public opinion. Marrying into the British royal family meant scrutiny at a level most of us can't even imagine. Every claim about background, education, and character became fodder for analysis and discussion. If the foundation of Meghan's story, her education, is false, it calls into question her entire public image. Not just the accolades, interviews, or charitable work, but the authenticity of her persona itself. In celebrity culture, credibility is everything. And in royalty, perception is reality. It's also important to recognize the psychological and social dynamics at play. Being constantly in the public eye, particularly in the context of celebrity and royalty, creates immense pressure to maintain a flawless image. The temptation to embellish, exaggerate, or even fabricate details is stronger than most people can imagine. But when a public figure's background is scrutinized to the extent that Meghan's is, even small inconsistencies can snowball into major controversies. Samantha Markle's claims suggest that this isn't just small embellishment. It's foundational deception, the kind that shakes the very core of a public persona. Let's also talk about the role of media in shaping perceptions. For years, mainstream and tabloid outlets alike reported Meghan's academic achievements without digging deeply into verification. Interviews, profiles, and features cited her degree, her international studies, and her intellectual pursuits as if they were established facts. Fans accepted these narratives at face value. Social media amplified them further, turning claims into viral talking points. In this ecosystem, challenging the narrative is difficult, and when the challenge comes from family members, it's often dismissed as jealousy or bitterness. But Samantha's assertions demand more than dismissal, they demand examination. Another striking element is the emotional impact of these revelations. For many, Meghan's story is aspirational. The idea that a talented, ambitious woman can rise from a Hollywood background to marry into the royal family is compelling. To suggest that her achievements may not be what they seem introduces a jarring emotional dissonance. Fans feel betrayed, curious, skeptical, or incredulous. Critics feel vindicated. And neutral observers are left questioning everything. The person, the media, and the broader culture that allowed such a narrative to dominate without verification. In dissecting Meghan's public persona versus reality, the key takeaway is this. Persona is not the same as reality. Celebrities, particularly those in the upper echelons of fame and royalty, operate in a world where image is currency and narrative is power. Every interview, every photograph, every public statement contributes to a carefully constructed identity. But identity, when built on shaky foundations or falsehoods, is fragile. Samantha Markle's allegations suggest that Meghan's foundation may be far shakier than anyone realized, and that the public image we have celebrated may not withstand scrutiny. And yet, the story is far from over. The tension between public persona and private reality is just the first layer. As we move forward, we will explore the evidence, the claims, and the reactions that make this story so explosive. We will hear from family members, former teachers, and public records experts. We will examine timelines, contradictions, and inconsistencies that raise serious questions about the narrative of Meghan's education. And through it all, one question looms larger than any other. If the foundation of her public persona is false, what does that mean for the person we think we know? Family drama is often messy, but when it spills into the global spotlight, it becomes explosive. And that is exactly what happened when Samantha Markle decided to speak out about her sister, Meghan. While Meghan had carefully cultivated an image of elegance, intelligence, and accomplishment, Samantha painted a very different picture, one filled with contradictions, embellishments, and, according to her, outright fabrications. The tension between these two narratives is what makes this story so gripping, and it all begins with Samantha's willingness to break silence. From the outside looking in, Samantha Markle has often been portrayed as the disgruntled sibling, the one left behind, overshadowed, and frustrated by Meghan's meteoric rise to fame and royal attention. But as Samantha herself has consistently argued, her motivation is not jealousy. She insists that her role is that of a whistleblower, a sister revealing the truth that the world has been misled about for decades. According to Samantha, Meghan's public persona, her educational background, her accomplishments, even her humanitarian work, is heavily curated and at times fabricated. These claims, especially about Meghan's alleged university degree, are explosive because they directly contradict the narrative consumed by millions of fans worldwide. Samantha's public statements are often blunt, unfiltered, and emotionally charged. She describes a sister who is extremely media-savvy, calculating, and conscious of how she is perceived by the world. According to Samantha, Meghan understands the power of narrative and has repeatedly leveraged it to position herself in favorable light. While critics might dismiss this as typical family rivalry, there is an undeniable specificity to her claims, particularly regarding Meghan's educational history. Samantha has repeatedly pointed to the absence of verifiable university records as evidence that her sister's claims about a degree are untrue. This is not simply an opinion. It is a challenge that demands verification and scrutiny. The emotional stakes in Samantha's revelations are also significant. Being a sibling of someone who has achieved global fame comes with both pressure and resentment. Samantha has spoken about feeling sidelined, overlooked, and misrepresented in the media narrative that glorifies Meghan. She frames her public disclosures not as attacks for attention, but as attempts to present what she views as the unvarnished truth. Her claims resonate because they come from someone with intimate knowledge of Meghan's upbringing, schooling, and family dynamics, a perspective that no media profile or PR statement can replicate. Samantha has not limited herself to vague accusations. She provides detailed anecdotes, timelines, and public commentary that are intended to challenge the mainstream narrative. For example, she cites her own observations of Meghan's schooling and early career trajectory to argue that the claim of a university degree does not align with reality. Former classmates and family friends, she asserts, corroborate the view that Meghan's educational achievements have been exaggerated. These claims are designed to disrupt the image of Meghan as the polished, accomplished, media-ready figure presented to the world. What makes Samantha's narrative so compelling is the contrast she draws between perception and reality. Meghan is celebrated as an educated, worldly, and socially conscious figure. Samantha presents evidence, or at least claims supported by anecdotal recollection and public record searches, that suggest a very different picture. By doing so, Samantha forces the audience to grapple with cognitive dissonance. How can the glamorous, articulate, and accomplished woman known worldwide be the same person her sister describes as someone whose educational credentials are unverifiable and possibly fabricated? Samantha's decision to go public also invites reflection on the ethics and dynamics of family loyalty versus truth-telling. Speaking out about a sibling in such a high-profile context is fraught with risk. Critics may accuse Samantha of seeking attention, exploiting family tensions, or attempting to profit from her sister's fame. Yet she has consistently framed her motivation as exposing deception and holding her sister accountable, particularly because the claims involve public perception and credibility. In other words, Samantha argues that this is not merely a family dispute. It is a matter of truth versus fabrication on a global stage. The controversy extends beyond personal grievance. Meghan's public image, and the trust placed in her by millions, relies on the credibility of her biography. If her educational background is indeed misrepresented, then her entire public persona is called into question. That's why Samantha's claims are more than just tabloid fodder. They are a direct challenge to a carefully constructed narrative, one that has been reinforced by media coverage, interviews, and public appearances over many years. Samantha's willingness to articulate this challenge makes her voice particularly potent and controversial. It's also worth noting the emotional tone of Samantha's public statements. She often speaks with a mixture of frustration, incredulity, and urgency. She recounts moments from her childhood, family interactions, and public observations with the intent of illustrating a consistent pattern that Meghan has systematically presented a version of herself that may not be entirely accurate. This combination of personal anecdote and pointed accusation creates a compelling narrative structure. The audience is not just hearing claims about a degree. They are experiencing the emotional intensity of sibling testimony, the tension of long-standing family dynamics, and the shock of alleged deception. Samantha's claims have been amplified by media coverage, particularly in outlets that focus on royal news and celebrity drama. Each interview, each social media post, adds layers to the story. Her statements about Meghan's education are repeated, dissected, and debated, creating a feedback loop of attention and scrutiny. The result is a story that feels both intimate, because it comes from a family member, and globally significant, because it concerns a figure of immense public interest. The intersection of family tension, celebrity culture, and claims of fabrication is what gives this story its dramatic power. But the controversy does not end there. Samantha has also hinted at further evidence, suggesting that the discrepancies she identifies in Meghan's education are part of a broader pattern of embellishment. According to Samantha, the degree is not the only claim that warrants scrutiny. By framing this as part of a larger issue, she amplifies the stakes and keeps public curiosity alive. Each new statement, each new anecdote, builds tension, creating a narrative that is impossible to ignore. The audience is left with difficult questions. Should we trust Samantha's account? Are her claims motivated by genuine concern for truth, or by resentment and attention-seeking? How does the public weigh the word of a family member against a polished public persona reinforced by media and celebrity culture? These questions are deliberately unresolved at this stage, designed to maintain suspense and engagement. Samantha's revelations act as both the spark and the fuse, igniting curiosity while leaving the full impact pending further evidence and exploration. By speaking out, Samantha Markle also exposes the delicate balance between personal loyalty and public accountability. In celebrity culture, this tension is magnified. Family members are often pressured to remain silent, yet silence can allow misinformation or embellishment to dominate public narratives. Samantha's decision to break that silence disrupts the balance and forces the audience to confront the uncomfortable possibility that what they have been told may not be true. It is a moment of reckoning, both for Meghan and for anyone who has celebrated her image without question. Samantha's narrative is compelling because it combines specificity with emotional resonance. She does not merely claim that Meghan's educational credentials are fabricated. She provides context, anecdotes, and family perspective that give weight to her claims. She highlights inconsistencies, points to missing records, and frames her observations within the broader story of Meghan's rise to global prominence. The result is a narrative that is not only provocative but also difficult to dismiss outright. For viewers, it is the kind of story that demands attention, sparks debate, and keeps audiences engaged. And yet, despite the drama and the allegations, Samantha leaves the story open-ended, intentionally. She hints at evidence, teases additional revelations, and keeps the audience on edge. Her goal is not simply to tell a story, but to compel viewers to think critically about what they have been told, to question narratives, and to engage with the unfolding drama. The tension she creates is a masterclass in storytelling. The audience is left wanting more, compelled to follow the next twist, and eager to see what proof or contradiction emerges next. But just as the tension builds, just as the audience starts to wonder what is true and what is false, a new layer of intrigue appears. Samantha's claims about Meghan's education are only the beginning. There are records, former teachers, classmates, and social media traces that may either corroborate or challenge her statements. And the deeper we dig, the more surprising the contradictions become. What was initially framed as a family feud transforms into a complex exposé on public perception, media amplification, and the fine line between persona and reality. As Samantha continues to speak out, the stakes rise exponentially. Her voice challenges the world to rethink what it knows, to question celebrity narratives, and to confront the possibility that public figures may not be as they appear. And in doing so, she sets the stage for the where we examine the very degree that sparked this controversy, and where the first tangible evidence of discrepancy begins to emerge. Imagine building your entire public image on a foundation that the world assumes is solid, only to discover that the cornerstone may be missing entirely. For Meghan Markle, that cornerstone has long been her university degree. Northwestern University, a prestigious institution in Illinois, is the name most often associated with her academic achievements. Her public narrative, from interviews to media profiles, has consistently presented her as an educated, accomplished woman, a narrative that aligns with her polished persona, her Hollywood career, and eventually, her entry into the royal family. But according to Samantha Markle, that narrative may be entirely fabricated. The story of Meghan's alleged degree is compelling because it sits at the intersection of perception, identity, and public trust. To the casual observer, a degree is a simple credential, a line on a resume that conveys effort, achievement, and intelligence. For Meghan, it is more than that. It is a signal of legitimacy, sophistication, and preparedness for a global stage. It is the kind of credential that reinforces her image as someone who can navigate complex social, political, and cultural environments. But what if that credential doesn't exist? What if, as Samantha claims, the degree is nothing more than a public relations construct, a story designed to bolster an already glamorous image? Let's start with the details of the claim itself. Meghan Markle is widely reported to have attended Northwestern University, studying theater and international relations. Profiles of her life consistently cite her education at this institution as a significant milestone, the foundation for her acting career and her worldview. Yet, when Samantha Markle began scrutinizing these claims, she noticed discrepancies. She argues that no verifiable records exist to confirm that Meghan completed a degree at Northwestern, and she points to inconsistencies in timelines, anecdotal accounts, and public statements that suggest embellishment. The claim itself is simple. The degree may never have existed, but the implications are profound. To understand the gravity of this allegation, consider the context. When someone rises to public prominence, particularly in celebrity culture or royalty, every detail about their past is scrutinized. Interviews, profiles, and media coverage act as a verification system, albeit an imperfect one. In Meghan's case, her claimed degree has been reported repeatedly across reputable outlets, rarely questioned, and often used as evidence of her intelligence and preparation for the public stage she would eventually occupy. Yet Samantha's assertion forces us to question not only the degree itself, but the system that allowed it to go unverified for so long. The controversy over Meghan's alleged degree also highlights the tension between narrative and verification. On one hand, the public enjoys a compelling story. A young woman from Los Angeles rises through education, talent, and ambition to achieve fame, influence, and ultimately, a royal marriage. On the other hand, when a close family member like Samantha claims that key parts of that story are fabricated, it forces a re-examination of the narrative's foundation. It's not just about whether Meghan attended Northwestern. It's about whether the story the world has consumed for years is accurate. Samantha's critique goes beyond simple denial. She points to specific gaps in public records, conflicting accounts from classmates and teachers, and inconsistencies in Meghan's own statements about her academic timeline. These are not vague suspicions. They are targeted challenges designed to undermine the credibility of a claim that has, until now, been largely accepted at face value. For anyone invested in the truth, these contradictions demand attention. For those who admire Meghan, they provoke discomfort. And for the media, they present a dilemma: how to report on claims that, if true, could dramatically alter public perception, yet are difficult to verify independently. The alleged degree is also central to Meghan's broader public image. Education, after all, is not just a line on a resume. It is a symbol of competence, credibility, and sophistication. In Hollywood, degrees are often cited to demonstrate discipline, intellect, and social awareness. For Meghan, the Northwestern University claim reinforced her narrative as someone who was not just a talented actress, but also a thoughtful, worldly individual capable of engaging in international discourse. Without that degree, the narrative shifts. It introduces doubt, ambiguity, and the potential for scrutiny that can unravel years of public perception. Adding complexity to the issue is the role of media and celebrity culture. The repeated reporting of Meghan's degree across magazines, interviews, and online profiles created a perception of legitimacy. Once a story is widely accepted, it becomes difficult to challenge, even in the face of contrary evidence. Samantha's claims disrupt this accepted narrative, forcing journalists, fans, and the public to confront the possibility that what they have been told may not be entirely accurate. The controversy lies not just in whether Meghan earned the degree, but in the way media amplification allowed an unverified claim to become a cornerstone of her public identity. Furthermore, Samantha's allegations highlight the broader consequences of fabricated credentials in a highly visible career. If Meghan's degree is false, it raises questions about other aspects of her biography. How much of her public persona is curated, exaggerated, or fabricated? What motivates such embellishments? Ambition, necessity, or the pressures of fame? And, critically, how does the audience reconcile admiration for her accomplishments with the possibility that key details may be untrue? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are unavoidable in the context of the claims Samantha has made. The drama deepens when we consider the implications for the royal family. Meghan's marriage to Prince Harry elevated her profile to global prominence and placed her under unprecedented scrutiny. Royal life is steeped in tradition, ceremony, and expectation, and public perception is paramount. If the narrative of Meghan's educational attainment is flawed, it affects not just her personal credibility, but the public image of the family she married into. The stakes are no longer personal or familial, they are institutional and cultural. In examining the alleged degree, it's also important to note the emotional undercurrents. Samantha Markle's tone in interviews and public statements conveys a mix of frustration, disbelief, and urgency. She is not merely making a factual challenge. She is expressing the emotional toll of witnessing what she perceives as a long-standing pattern of deception. Her critique is grounded in personal experience, observation, and the perspective of someone who has lived alongside Meghan. This emotional dimension adds depth to her claims, making them more than mere gossip. They are a charged exposé from someone with insider knowledge. The alleged degree also sparks debate about public trust and accountability. In a culture that reveres celebrity achievement, education functions as a form of authority. When that authority is called into question, audiences are forced to reconsider their assumptions. Samantha's allegations create cognitive dissonance. How can someone celebrated for intelligence, worldliness, and achievement be accused of falsifying such a fundamental aspect of their background? The tension between admiration and skepticism is what makes this story so compelling. It's a narrative built on contradiction and uncertainty. And then there is the evidence, or at least the claims about evidence. Samantha asserts that attempts to verify Meghan's attendance and graduation at Northwestern University yield no concrete proof. Public records searches, inquiries with the university, and anecdotal accounts from classmates reportedly fail to corroborate the degree claim. This absence of evidence is, in itself, striking. While the lack of verification is not definitive proof of fabrication, it is enough to cast serious doubt on the widely accepted narrative. For a public figure whose identity is built in part on educational achievement, this is a serious vulnerability. As the story unfolds, the audience is left with critical questions. Did Meghan Markle intentionally misrepresent her education? Or is there a misunderstanding exacerbated by media amplification? How does one evaluate the credibility of family testimony in a global context? And what are the consequences, both personal and public, if these claims are substantiated? The tension created by these questions keeps audiences engaged, drives curiosity, and sets the stage for the next layer of the story. One in which investigative scrutiny begins to examine records, timelines, and the perspectives of those who allegedly knew Meghan during her supposed university years. By focusing on the alleged university degree, we see the first tangible point of conflict between Meghan's public persona and the claims made by Samantha. This is where the story moves from speculation and family tension to concrete challenges that demand attention. The degree, long assumed to be fact, becomes a symbol of the larger debate about authenticity, credibility, and perception. And as the investigation deepens, the narrative takes on an almost cinematic quality. The polished public figure, the whistleblowing sibling, the hidden inconsistencies, all converging in a story of revelation and suspense. Public records are supposed to be objective. They are supposed to provide verifiable facts. The kind of evidence that cuts through rumors, hearsay, and family drama. When it comes to Meghan Markle's alleged university degree, public records become the battleground where truth and perception clash. Samantha Markle has claimed repeatedly that no evidence exists to support Meghan's purported degree from Northwestern University. But what happens when you start digging? What does the trail of official documents, transcripts, and administrative responses reveal? And what does it leave unexplained? The process of investigating Meghan's educational background is complex. Universities maintain strict privacy policies, meaning that personal records like transcripts and diplomas are rarely released publicly without consent. That makes verifying attendance and graduation far more challenging than it might initially appear. Yet, Samantha's assertions hinge on precisely this gap, the inability to find concrete evidence confirming Meghan's degree. According to her, she has conducted extensive inquiries and has yet to uncover records that corroborate her sister's public claims. Journalists and investigators attempting the same process encounter similar hurdles. Publicly available information, such as commencement programs, alumni announcements, and press mentions, provides partial insight but rarely a complete picture. Alumni lists and commencement booklets can be checked, but they are often incomplete, and errors do occur. What is striking, however, is the pattern Samantha points out. Across multiple sources and methods, no clear evidence confirms that Meghan earned her degree in the time frame she claims. The absence of records creates a tension between skepticism and interpretation. On the one hand, a lack of documentation is not proof of fabrication. Errors, privacy laws, and institutional oversight can all contribute to missing records. On the other hand, when a public figure repeatedly claims a credential that cannot be verified, the suspicion grows. Samantha Markle leverages this tension to cast doubt on her sister's narrative, presenting the lack of evidence as part of a broader pattern of misrepresentation. Digging deeper, investigators encounter contradictions in timelines and statements. Meghan has, in various interviews, referenced her college experience in ways that do not always align with the documented academic calendar or reported activities of Northwestern University during her supposed years of attendance. These discrepancies, while subtle, add to the perception that her public narrative may not perfectly align with verifiable reality. Each conflicting statement, each unverifiable claim, becomes another piece of the puzzle Samantha is trying to assemble. Public records also intersect with anecdotal testimony. Former classmates and acquaintances have been cited by Samantha as saying that they have no recollection of Meghan attending classes or graduating. While memories can be unreliable, when multiple accounts converge with the absence of documentation, it strengthens the argument that there may be inconsistencies in Meghan's educational history. These accounts, combined with the lack of records, form the basis for Samantha's most explosive claims that her sister's degree, as presented to the public, may not exist. Another layer of complexity emerges when considering the role of media in reinforcing the narrative of Meghan's education. Journalists, biographers, and public relations professionals have long cited her degree as fact, often without independent verification. Press releases, interviews, and magazine profiles repeat the claim, creating a feedback loop that makes it widely accepted. Yet the lack of public records to support the claim introduces tension. It raises critical questions. How did such a foundational piece of information escape rigorous fact-checking? And if it is inaccurate, what does that say about the interplay between celebrity narrative and media responsibility? Samantha Markle's focus on public records also highlights the emotional dimension of family testimony. For her, the lack of verification is not merely a procedural inconvenience. It is evidence of deception. She frames the story as one of accountability, a public figure presenting a fabricated version of herself to millions. This emotional framing amplifies the controversy because it taps into a universal concern: trust. When someone's public persona is built, in part, on unverifiable claims, audiences feel misled. They experience frustration, disbelief, and curiosity, all of which drive engagement and debate. The investigation into records also raises questions about the challenges of verifying information in a celebrity context. Unlike ordinary graduates, public figures like Meghan have layers of media exposure, personal branding, and curated appearances that complicate straightforward verification. Private records, family accounts, and media narratives all interact in ways that obscure clarity. Samantha Markle's claims highlight the importance of transparency and scrutiny in a world where fame can create barriers to factual verification. Perhaps most revealing is the contrast between what is known and what is claimed. Public documents, where available, confirm some aspects of Meghan's early education but leave gaps in higher education verification. These gaps are precisely what Samantha seizes upon. She argues that the absence of evidence is significant, especially given the public prominence of her sister and the repeated claims about a prestigious degree. It is not simply a question of memory or error. It is a structural absence that cannot be easily explained away. The process of digging through records also introduces unexpected revelations. Administrators and public officials, while often constrained by privacy rules, occasionally provide indirect confirmation of gaps or discrepancies. Some have noted that requests for verification of Meghan's degree returned incomplete or inconclusive results. Others point to inconsistencies in the documentation that is publicly available, including commencement records and alumni lists. These details, while technical, create a pattern of uncertainty that Samantha leverages in her narrative. Emotional stakes rise further when considering the public perception of education itself. Degrees are symbols. They confer status, credibility, and authority. When a degree is allegedly misrepresented, it calls into question not only the individual's honesty, but also the broader systems of trust in celebrity culture. Samantha Markle's claims force the public to confront a difficult question. How much of what we admire in public figures is constructed, curated, or even fabricated? The tension between belief and skepticism is heightened by the fact that Meghan's education has been foundational to her persona, her career, and her credibility. Digging through records also uncovers smaller, seemingly mundane details that, taken together, create a larger picture of inconsistency. Class rosters, yearbooks, and alumni newsletters provide fragments of information that may support or contradict claims about attendance. Samantha uses these fragments strategically, highlighting absences, discrepancies, and anomalies as evidence that the public narrative may not align with reality. Each piece of missing documentation becomes a question mark, a point of curiosity, and a potential pivot in the unfolding story. Moreover, the investigation underscores the difficulty of reconciling personal testimony with institutional verification. Samantha Markle speaks from memory, family observation, and anecdotal evidence. Public records, meanwhile, are incomplete or inaccessible. The resulting tension between subjective family accounts and objective verification fuels the drama. It is precisely this tension that keeps audiences engaged, prompting debates about truth, credibility, and the reliability of public narratives. By the end of this deep dive, one conclusion becomes clear. Public records, or the lack thereof, are central to the controversy over Meghan's alleged degree. They provide both the foundation for Samantha's claims and the fuel for public debate. The missing verification is not simply an administrative issue. It is the spark for a larger exploration of identity, narrative, and accountability. In other words, the absence of evidence becomes evidence in its own right, or at least a significant point of curiosity and doubt. As the story continues, the focus shifts from the abstract, the claims, the tension, the speculation, to more concrete accounts. Former classmates, teachers, and administrators become key witnesses in the narrative. Their recollections, combined with the gaps in documentation, create a mosaic of ambiguity that Samantha uses to challenge the polished image of her sister. Each new account adds layers of intrigue, contradictions, and emotional intensity, keeping the audience riveted and eager for what comes next. But just when it seems the trail has run cold, an unexpected discovery emerges. A record, a recollection, or a piece of documentation that simultaneously raises more questions than it answers, threatening to upend everything the public thought it knew about Meghan Markle's education. When most people think about education, they think about high school, college, degrees, and diplomas. But according to Samantha Markle, the roots of the controversy about Meghan's education run much deeper, all the way back to primary school. It's here, Samantha claims, that the story of Meghan's supposed academic accomplishments begins to unravel, revealing inconsistencies that have only compounded over the years. This is not just about exaggerating a resume for Hollywood or embellishing a public persona. This is about the very foundation of learning, achievement, and narrative, the starting point that supposedly set Meghan on a path toward fame, influence, and eventually, royalty. Samantha's revelations are shocking because they challenge assumptions that most people take for granted. Everyone assumes that a celebrity's educational trajectory follows a linear, verifiable path: primary school, secondary school, perhaps extracurricular achievements, then college or university. This is the blueprint we are accustomed to. But according to Samantha, Meghan's path may have deviated in ways that are both surprising and consequential. She alleges that Meghan's formal education ended far earlier than publicly acknowledged, suggesting that claims of higher education may not be grounded in reality. Samantha has repeatedly described her sister as having been a bright child in some respects, but one whose schooling was inconsistent. Anecdotes from family, neighbors, and acquaintances paint a picture of a girl who, while socially adept and media-savvy from an early age, may not have excelled academically in ways that would typically lead to a university degree. Samantha's contention is that the foundation for the claims about Northwestern University is shaky because the early years, the primary school years, set a pattern that was never corrected or substantiated. The allegations about Meghan's early education are particularly compelling because they come from someone who lived through those formative years. Samantha recalls moments that she says are evidence of a gap between Meghan's reported academic abilities and reality. She describes instances where Meghan struggled with certain subjects, relied on family support to complete assignments, or presented achievements that were, according to her, inflated. While these accounts are anecdotal, they carry weight because they offer an insider perspective that is otherwise inaccessible to the public. One of the most controversial aspects of Samantha's claims is the suggestion that Meghan's early schooling may have been less rigorous than what is typical for students who eventually attend top-tier universities. Samantha has alleged that records from primary school, report cards, standardized testing results, and teacher evaluations either do not exist or contradict the narrative Meghan has presented. If true, this would indicate that the foundation for the claimed university-level education was, at best, incomplete, and at worst, constructed for public consumption. What makes the primary school revelation particularly dramatic is the emotional undertone. Samantha frames her claims not as attacks on her sister's character, but as attempts to reveal the truth. She describes feeling conflicted. On one hand, she wants to protect her own credibility and speak out. On the other, she grapples with the ethical implications of exposing family history to a global audience. This emotional tension resonates with audiences because it humanizes the conflict. It is not merely gossip, but a complex interplay of loyalty, responsibility, and personal ethics. Samantha also emphasizes the continuity between Meghan's early schooling and later claims about higher education. She suggests that patterns established in primary school, embellishment, selective storytelling, and the crafting of personal narrative, were carried forward into adulthood. According to Samantha, what begins as exaggeration or omission in early school years eventually becomes a broader strategy: the creation of a persona capable of navigating Hollywood, the media, and ultimately, the royal family. The degree, then, is not just a credential but the culmination of a long-standing pattern of narrative construction. Adding to the intrigue, Samantha points out inconsistencies in the accounts provided by former classmates, teachers, and family friends. Some recall Meghan excelling in certain areas, particularly in performance-related activities like drama and public speaking. Others, however, remember gaps in academic rigor or periods of disengagement from formal studies. These conflicting accounts reinforce the ambiguity, creating a narrative tension that captivates audiences. It's not a simple story of success or failure. It is a story of perception versus reality, of claims versus evidence, and of public image versus private history. The primary school revelations also underscore the power of context. In Hollywood and celebrity culture, the trajectory from child to adult often involves storytelling that shapes public perception. Samantha argues that Meghan's early life was already being shaped into a narrative suitable for public consumption, a young girl destined for greatness, endowed with talent, intelligence, and ambition. Yet, if the foundation, the primary school years, does not support this trajectory, the later narrative about university degrees and global accomplishment becomes questionable. Samantha's focus on primary education also highlights the generational dynamics at play. In her view, parents, teachers, and peers all contributed to an environment in which Meghan's persona could flourish, sometimes at the expense of factual accuracy. She describes a family culture where image, perception, and media readiness were prioritized, creating a stage on which Meghan's persona could be performed. Early exaggerations or omissions, then, were not isolated incidents but part of a broader pattern that extended into adulthood. Another striking element is the way Samantha frames this as a public concern, not merely a private family dispute. She argues that when Meghan presents herself as educated and accomplished, the public has a right to accurate information. The primary school claims, therefore, are not trivial. They are part of a larger critique of transparency, credibility, and accountability. According to Samantha, if the foundation is weak, then every subsequent claim, including the university degree, is called into question. The drama of the primary school revelation also lies in its implications for Meghan's credibility. Early education is often seen as formative, shaping not only knowledge but character, discipline, and ambition. If, as Samantha suggests, Meghan's early schooling was inconsistent or exaggerated, it challenges the narrative that she naturally progressed to high-level academic achievement. For audiences, this creates a tension between admiration and doubt, between belief in the public persona and the possibility of fabrication. Samantha's claims are further amplified by media attention. Each revelation about Meghan's early education sparks discussion, debate, and social media commentary. Supporters and critics alike weigh in, dissecting the claims, evaluating the plausibility, and speculating about motive. The result is a feedback loop of engagement, where curiosity and skepticism feed each other, keeping the story in the spotlight and intensifying the drama. But the most shocking aspect of Samantha's primary school revelations is the connection to later discrepancies in higher education. By tracing a pattern from childhood exaggeration to alleged university misrepresentation, Samantha constructs a narrative in which Meghan's public persona is not simply the product of ambition and talent, but the result of a carefully curated and possibly fabricated life story. This is what makes the revelations so explosive. They are not isolated claims, but part of a broader exposé that challenges the authenticity of a global public figure. And just when the audience believes they are beginning to understand the scope of the discrepancies, Samantha hints at further revelations, details from middle school, high school, and other formative years that deepen the intrigue and amplify the questions. The primary school story is only the beginning. It sets the stage for a complex investigation into patterns, claims, and contradictions that span decades of Meghan Markle's life. By the end of this chapter, one thing is clear. The foundation upon which Meghan's public persona was built is not as solid as it appears. Primary school, the earliest stage of formal education, is already riddled with questions, inconsistencies, and potential exaggerations. And as the investigation moves forward, these early patterns will continue to illuminate and complicate the story of the alleged university degree, public perception, and the persona that the world has celebrated for years. But the revelations are far from over. When former classmates, school administrators, and archival records are examined, a shocking pattern begins to emerge, one that threatens to rewrite the narrative entirely. When allegations about a public figure's education arise, one of the most compelling sources of insight comes from those who were there, the classmates, peers, and friends who shared classrooms, hallways, and school experiences. In the case of Meghan Markle, Samantha Markle has repeatedly pointed to former classmates as key witnesses, individuals whose recollections could either support or challenge her claims about Meghan's early education and alleged university degree. What these classmates say, and how consistent or inconsistent their accounts are, adds an entirely new dimension to the story, turning abstract claims into a vivid, human-centered narrative. Samantha has long emphasized that the accounts of former classmates are crucial for understanding the reality behind Meghan's public persona. According to Samantha, multiple classmates have come forward privately, sharing recollections that paint a picture different from the narrative that has been widely circulated. Some describe Meghan as socially skilled, charismatic, and ambitious, traits consistent with her public image. Others, however, remember gaps in her academic performance, exaggerations about her achievements, and claims about her future education that were not substantiated at the time. This divergence in memories is the first sign that the story is far more complicated than it appears on the surface. One of the most striking elements of these accounts is the focus on educational discrepancies. Several classmates reportedly recall Meghan talking about ambitions that seemed larger than what her actual academic record suggested. For instance, she is said to have mentioned attending prestigious universities or pursuing specific academic programs. Yet there is no evidence in class records, yearbooks, or graduation lists to confirm these claims.